The day my wife's first love returned from abroad, I wisely packed my bags and prepared to leave. I had just reached the door dragging my suitcase when my wife, Shin Qingyan, caught up with me and asked, "Where are you going at midnight?" I simply replied, "He's back. I should leave now." Before Qingyana could say anything, my in-laws came running there. My father-in-law quickly snatched my suitcase and said, "What nonsense are you talking?" Then they took both me and my suitcase back inside the house. My mother-in-law held my hand and cried, saying, "Our Shin family only considers you their son-in-law." Meanwhile, Qing Yuan came to me smiling and put her arms around my waist and said, "You fool, I don't care about him anymore. Now only you are in my heart." Without saying anything, I took out the list from my pocket which I had prepared long ago. It detailed what Fusinian could do after returning. First, he will taunt me for being his substitute. The second one will deliberately spill red wine on himself at a banquet and blame it on me, and finally he will pretend to fall down the stairs and say that I pushed him. My in-laws' eyes widened as they read the entire list. My mother-in-law immediately handed the list to the butler and said that from tomorrow all our people in the city will wear body cameras. But as soon as she read the last point, Qingwan said yes loudly. She said, "If you hadn't used this method to attract my attention at that time, I probably wouldn't have forgotten Sinian so quickly. Don't worry. He is a good person. Will not harm you." But the first thing Fusinian said when he met me silenced everyone present there. He looked at me and said, "So you are Lingzhou, little brother? You really do look a lot like me. Xingwen, you have been doing well these past few years." The whole family became completely silent. I shrugged my shoulders helplessly and signaled everyone with my eyes. "See, I already said it." But contrary to my expectations, Fusinian suddenly changed his tone. He came to me smiling and gently placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't misunderstand, Linzhou. I mean, Qing Yuan is so lucky to have a wonderful husband like you. You two are truly made for each other." There was so much truth in his eyes and voice that I got confused for a few moments. What is this happening? This first love was not going as per my plan. Qingwan gently held my arm and said with a smile, "See, I told you that you are thinking so much unnecessarily. Sinian is a good person. He will not create problems for you." My mother-in-law and father-in-law also breathed a sigh of relief. My mother-in-law patted my hand and said, "Linzhou, you think too much. Relax. Our Shin family only regards you as their son-in-law." In the middle of the banquet, I made an excuse to go to the restroom to calm my mind a bit. But as soon as I reached the hallway, I ran into Xian, a junior from Qingyan, who always irritated me. This time he didn't even try to hide the burning sensation in his eyes. He taunted, "Hey, this is our substitute husband. Now that the real man is back, you don't feel ashamed to stick around. If I were in your place, I would have packed my things and left long ago." I looked at him coldly and said, "Why are you so concerned about whether I stay or go? Is it possible that you are jealous that Qingnan married me?" Xian's face immediately turned red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Shirya Linjin, just you wait." A little while later, I was heading to the terrace to get some fresh air, glass of wine in hand. As I passed the buffet table, I noticed that the Fusinians had their backs to me. Was talking to some elderly guest. I was about to pass by him when suddenly someone pushed me from behind with full force. My body tumbled forward uncontrollably, and the red wine in my hand flew through the air, landing directly on Fusinian's expensive white suit. The very next moment the entire atmosphere froze. All the guests around us started looking at us, and soon there was a hushed whisper all around. "Xilings, how even though you are jealous of Sinian, it's not right to deliberately throw wine on him in front of everyone. You have crossed all limits." I composed myself and immediately realized that it was Shiryan's cheap trick that had pushed me from behind. It was clearly him. I took a deep breath and looked at Shin Xingnan and my in-laws who had come running forward. Surprise was clearly visible on the faces of all three. I said in a calm voice, looking directly at Shiryan, "I didn't do it intentionally. Someone pushed me from behind." Xian immediately said, "Who pushed you?" "Everyone here saw you go straight to Sinian with a glass in your hand." Then he pretended to be sad and angry and said, "Uncle Qinggan, auntie, you have to do something for Sinian." Shen Qingwan looked at me with confused eyes. I could clearly feel the doubt hidden in his eyes. Then he saw Fu Xinyan's white suit soaked in wine and his eyebrows furrowed. A wave of helplessness ran through me. As expected, a person's mind easily stops working as soon as something goes wrong with their first love. I said with a faint smile, looking at Qinghan, "Look at the second point on my list. It came a little late, but it definitely came. Now will you leave my luggage and let me go?" Whispers immediately broke out among the guests standing nearby. How could the son-in-law of the Shen family play such a cheap trick for love? How small-minded he is. It is clearly burning. This man is very possessive. The story of Shen Qingyan and Fuck Xinian is still not over. Shut up, I heard Xia Linzhou is just a substitute for Xinian. My father-in-law's eyebrows furrowed. He said in a stern voice, stop talking nonsense. Lingzhou is not such a person. Until the truth comes out, no one will give a verdict as per their wish. My mother-in-law also immediately said that there are cameras installed everywhere in this place. Let's get the footage now and see who is actually behind this. The butler was about to obey, still quietly cleaning the wine from his suit. Fu Xinian suddenly looked up. He said, Uncle Auntie Qingwan, there is no need to check the cameras. Just now someone accidentally hit Lingzhou from behind. That's why the glass slipped from his hand. It was just an accident. He did not do anything intentionally. Please don't misunderstand him. Shiyan looked at him in disbelief. Xinian, but Fuss Xinian stopped him there. Xian, it was really just an accident. Then he turned towards me. There was a faint smile on his face. Lingzhou, it's okay. It's just a suit. Don't take it to heart. So easily he revealed the truth and proved my innocence. But instead of feeling relieved, this made me understand him even less. Why did Fuss Xinian miss such a good opportunity to trap me? Why did he help me instead? The tension on Xin Xingwan's face instantly eased. She came to me and held my arm and said, See, I told you Xinian is a very nice person. He will not let anything wrong happen to you. I saw Fuxian being taken by a server to have the stains on his suit cleaned. Then my eyes fell on Shiyan, whose face was sometimes turning red and sometimes white. But I did not feel relieved at all. Like last time, this time too Fuss Xinian defended me by telling the truth, and now he had won the trust of almost everyone, including my in-laws. That night before going to sleep, my wife said to me, now you are convinced, right? I already said that Xinian is not that kind of person. But I just kept staring at the ceiling in silence. When everyone in the house was asleep, I took out my notebook and put a small tick in front of the 5th point. Everyone will start defending Fu Xinian and I will end up being the one who doubts without reason. Over the next few days, Fu Xinian became a regular guest at the Shen family home. He would arrive every morning at exactly 9 a.m. Sometimes he would bring my father-in-law's favorite Mingtian Longjing tea, and sometimes my mother-in-law's favorite imported floral tea. He and Shenxingen would laugh heartily while talking about the old days of their college club. But as soon as I reached them, their conversation would suddenly stop. Then Fu Xinian would look at me and smile and say, Lingzhou, you know, Qingnan used to be very forgetful during her college days. One time she forgot to bring a microphone to an event and I ended up having to run out and borrow another one for her. At the dinner table, Fu Xinian handed me my favorite steamed fish and said, Qing Yuan always says that your stomach is a little weak, so you should eat a little more. His tone was so natural, as if he was the real owner of the house and I was just a guest. I followed Shen Qingyuan into the study and said, You only kept me here so I could see Fuck Xinian become the owner of this house. Qingyuan's hands suddenly stopped as she flipped through the documents. She turned and looked at me, her eyes clearly irritated. Sage Linzhou, do you always feel like everyone is against you? Xinian has moved on from that relationship long ago. But you're the one who keeps dwelling on past things. Do you enjoy it? With that, she slammed the door shut and left. The first major argument occurred at a weekend family meeting. My father-in-law tapped his fingers on the table and said, Shen Group's overseas cooperation project needs a director. Just then, Fuck Xinian walked in with a plate of fruit and spoke casually. Last time I met the Asia-Pacific director of that consortium in London, he said he was looking for a team he already knew. My father-in-law's eyes lit up. She got up. She turned to me and asked, How about we bring Lingzhou Xinian into the company to help us? He has the right experience. I immediately stood up. No, how can we let an outsider interfere in such an important project? But before I could finish, a look from Xin Xingwan silenced me. Fu Xingyan's eyes immediately turned red. She said in a low voice, Uncle, maybe I overstepped my bounds. I just noticed that Xingwan hadn't been able to sleep properly these past few days due to work. So I thought I'd help her a little. After all, he had deliberately remained silent before, as if he'd been deeply wronged. Immediately, voices started coming towards me. Shu Lingzhou Xinian is a professional, and it's about the well-being of this family. When have you become so narrow-minded and jealous? Lingzhou Xinian just wants to help. Don't look for ill intentions in everything he says. I asked the people in the room. Everyone looked at him. All eyes were slowly turning to Fuck Xinian. That night I added 2 more points to my list. He would try to infiltrate the company under the guise of offering help, and he was a master at swaying people's opinions by making himself look like a poor guy. But none of that mattered anymore. I had already decided I had to leave. What game was Fuxinian playing? He had nothing to do with me anymore. The next day a scream woke the entire house. My mother-in-law came into the living room, panicked, and said that a precious imperial green jade pendant, passed down in her family for 3 generations, had disappeared from her jewelry box. A search of the entire house ensued, from the storage room to the garage and even the nanny's room. Finally, Shin Xingyun's assistant found the pendant in the inner lining of my leather bag. Furthermore, a strand of my short hair was tangled in it. It felt like I'd been caught red-handed. How cheap and naive. It was a framing. I never imagined that something like this would happen to me right when I was about to leave this house. Shin Xingwan held onto the pendant so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She looked at me as if I were a stranger. Lingzhao, if you wanted jewelry I could have bought it for you. Why did you steal Mom's family headloom? It's the most precious thing in her dowry. I immediately said, I didn't steal it. Someone deliberately put it in my bag. Fu Xinian came into my room yesterday afternoon. But upon hearing my words, Qing Yuan stepped back and distanced herself from me, saying, Xinian was downstairs arranging flowers with Mom all afternoon yesterday. Everyone saw him. Lingzhou, can you stop falsely accusing him? I saw the suspicion in her eyes. Then the disappointment on my in-laws' faces. It felt as if someone had driven a sharp ice spike into my heart. Just then Fu Xinian came forward, steadying my breathing, and said, Uncle, Auntie Qingyan, the day before yesterday I thought I saw Lingzhu wandering around outside Auntie's jewelry room for a while. Maybe he just made a mistake at that time. Please don't blame him too much. My father-in-law slammed his hand on the table so hard that the teacups shook. Shilling, he yelled. Our Shen family has never spared a penny for your food and clothing, and you've done something so shameful. I said, Mom, Dad, you installed recording cameras all over the house, right? Just check the footage. I stared at Fuxinian. I expected at least a hint of panic to appear on his face, but he stood completely still. Shin Xingyun angrily said, What more is there to check? If anyone in this house has any filth in their mind, it's you. You're always suspicious. As if the whole world is conspiring against you. Just because Mom praised Xinian you stole her jade pendant. Shilling Zhong, you've truly disappointed me. When someone has already accused you, everything becomes evidence against you. No matter how much I explained, it was pointless. So I gave up and said, okay. I took it. I returned to my room. I left. I picked up my luggage and decided I wouldn't stay in this house for a moment longer. I had just dragged my suitcase to the door when Qing Yuan and Fuxinian came after me. Qing Yuan grabbed my suitcase and said in a commanding tone, Don't start all over again. Clear your mind before you leave. I pushed her hand away and was about to say something when suddenly, from the intersection, an out-of-control car came speeding toward us. A sharp screech of brakes filled the air. Amidst the chaos, Fuxinian immediately grabbed Shin Shixingwan and pushed her to the side of the road, and both of them tumbled to the other side. The impact knocked me down and my knee began to bleed profusely. Shin Shixingwan got up and ran straight to Fu Xinian. When she saw the blood gushing from Xinian's chest, her eyes turned red. Then she turned and looked at me. Her eyes clearly reflected her anger and hatred for me. She yelled, This is all yours. It happened because of a reason. If you hadn't been making a scene about leaving the house, none of this would have happened. If anything happens to Xinian, I'll never forgive you. The ambulance arrived shortly after, sirens blaring. As Fu Xinian was being wheeled into the ambulance, she said in a weak voice, My blood type is very rare. I don't know if I'll find matching blood. Upon hearing this, Shin Qingwan grabbed my wrist and said, Let's go to the hospital and donate blood for Xinian. I immediately refused, saying, I'm not going. His case doesn't concern me. Qingwan grabbed my shoulder and started pulling me towards the ambulance. Just then my mother-in-law came running in, grabbed my hand and said coldly, Our Shin family has never wronged you. Just donate blood for Xinian. In return, Mom will give you that jade pendant, and we'll forget everything that happened before. This was what pressure was being done in the name of favor. I was falsely accused of stealing the very thing I was humiliated for. Now I was being lured into giving blood for the same thing. I found it all absurd and frustrating. I didn't know when my father-in-law arrived. He said angrily, You still have to show off. Sinian saves Qingwan's life. What will you lose by donating a little blood for him? If you refuse, I will end your relationship with Qingwan and throw you out of this house empty-handed. When Shen Xingnan saw that I was still unwilling, he called 2 bodyguards. I yelled, trying to free myself. Leave me, Shen Xingwan. Let me go. Don't you remember the last point on my list? Someone as innocent as they appear. It is not necessary that he is equally innocent from inside. Shen Xingnan paused for a moment. A little hesitation appeared in his eyes. But the very next moment he lowered his eyes and with a gesture of his hand asked the bodyguards to take me to the car. After reaching the hospital, when the nurse came towards me with the needle, seeing its cold tip sent a shiver through my entire body. Then, in a blur, I saw Fusinian being brought to the bed next to me. Then his soft voice reached my ears. Do you know why I went abroad? And remember when we first met I said we looked alike? My heart started beating fast as soon as I heard him. Just then Shen Xingwan's secretary suddenly shouted in panic. The bad news is, Miss Shen, our overseas project, its core technology, and all the initial channel resources have just been completely taken over by a shell company. As soon as Qingwan heard this, his eyes immediately turned towards me. There was still doubt and hesitation in his eyes for me. I pulled a faint smile on my lips. Now I did not even have the strength to make fun of him. Even after all this, he was still suspicious of me. Shen Xingnan almost shouted, investigate. Find out who is the legal representative of that shell company? And who is really behind that anger. Even the veins on his forehead were visible. That project was part of Shen Group's larger strategy for the next several years. If he had been ruined, his loss would have been huge. In a trembling voice, the secretary began to tell the name of a person and the registration details of the company. The name was completely unknown. But the registered address of that shell company and the transaction traces of several accounts linked to it were gradually pointing towards a single person. A person who had recently been in constant contact with Shen Group's overseas branches and had also provided them with many important information. The entire hospital room suddenly became silent. It felt as if all the strength in Shen Xinghan's body had been drained in an instant. She stumbled back a step and then slowly turned her head in disbelief to look at the man lying on the hospital bed next to her. His face was pale and the bandage was still tied around his chest. That man was Fusinian. As soon as Qingyan's eyes met Fusinian's, his usual gentle smile disappeared from his face. Nor was there that deliberate helplessness on his face now. In its place was only a cold and almost merciless silence. Qinghan said in disbelief, "It was you from the beginning. This was all your plan." Fusinian laughed lightly. There was countless mockery and years of hatred hidden in his yes. "Shen Xingwan, did you understand now? Isn't it a bit late?" He looked at him coldly and said, "Did you really think I came back to rekindle our old relationship with you or to hurt myself by seeing you and my brother in love?" "Brother?" Shen Xingwan's eyes widened and he looked at me in shock. My mind went blank. The absurd suspicion I'd been trying to push out of my mind all along turned out to be true. Fuxinian's gaze now focused on me. There were so many mixed emotions in his eyes that I couldn't decipher them. Then he said, "Linzhou, my little brother, did you think your resemblance to me was just a coincidence? No, we share the same blood. You're the youngest son of our Fu family. The same child who disappeared in that accident 20 years ago." I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was empty. It felt as if all the blood in my body had frozen. Shen Xingwan asked nervously, "Which Fu family? But maybe the next one?" Instantly he seemed to remember something as his face grew even more distraught. Fuxinian's voice suddenly rose. Years of pent-up anger and hatred were evident in his every word. "And which Fu family?" "The same Fu family that your Shen family deliberately destroyed 20 years ago in a car accident designed to take over our business. The same accident that killed both my mom and dad." He continued to stare at Shen Xingyuan. His every word stung like a poisonous blade. "Shen Xingyuan, did you think our first meeting was just a coincidence? No. That was the first step in a plan hatched by my father's predecessors years ago. I deliberately got close to you. I entered into a relationship with you. Also I could get to the truth of that time." He paused for a moment and then said, "What did you think when I finally found the evidence and learned the full truth? Why did I suddenly leave you and go abroad? Did you think I was chasing money and status? No. I was trying to protect my own family." He was gathering strength. He was reconnecting with his father's old people and preparing a trap for today. He took a deep breath. His chest heaved rapidly with intense emotions, and it was clear that it was affecting his injuries. Then his voice softened. But I never imagined that the one person I've been searching for all these years, my only real brother, would be led by fate to the family of my greatest enemy, and he would become the son-in-law of that very Shin family. His gaze turned to me once again. This time there was pain in his eyes, along with a slight sense of guilt. He said softly, "I watched you standing with them. Your face was so much like mine. Yet you were unaware of the whole truth. You were kept in the dark and fooled, and I watched knowingly. How could I just stand by and watch my younger brother sink deeper and deeper into that quagmire? So, everything Fusinian did after he returned, all the actions that were hidden from us from above, were just a reflection of our actions. All those frame UPS, all those tricks that made me appear to everyone as the unreasonable suspect and the wrong person, all had one purpose: to shatter this false peace as quickly and as ruthlessly as possible. He wanted me to completely lose trust in the Shin family and Shin Qingyan, and to leave this family on my own." My voice trembled. I asked with difficulty, "You did all this between me and Qingyan just so Fusinian could fulfill my promise? To save you?" Then he looked at me and said, "I couldn't bear to see my younger brother consider his own enemies his family and live for them. And I didn't want you to suffer even more pain than I did after learning the whole truth." Shin Qingyan stood there like stone, as if she'd been struck by lightning. All the color drained from her face. She looked first at Fusinian, then at me. Her lips trembled, but not a word came out of her mouth. Overseas, the project's ruin and the revelation of a 20-year-old truth all at once. These two shocks seemed to age him years in an instant. I don't know when my in-laws had also reached the hospital room door. It was clear they had overheard most of our conversation. My mother-in-law's face had turned pale. She covered her mouth with her hand, and her body began to sway slightly. My father-in-law held his stick so tightly that his hand was shaking violently. His face showed more fear than surprise about the secret he had been holding back for so many years. Still, my father-in-law tried to compose himself. He pointed his stick at Fusinian and said, "Nonsense, Fusinian, you're falsely accusing us. What car accident? What business takeover? Nothing like that ever happened." Unfazed, Fusinian pulled a small USB drive from the pocket of his hospital gown and said, "No." His voice was as cold as ice. It contained a copy of the recording from that time in which the Shen family. He bribed the driver to fake the car's brakes failing. It contains financial transactions to transfer the Fu family's property and assets to his name. It also contains all the evidence that shows how you used your influence to suppress the entire case. Should I make all this public right now? My father-in-law's body suddenly faltered. If the secretary standing next to him hadn't caught him, he might have collapsed right there. The face that always exuded poise and authority now held only defeat and despair. He didn't respond, and sometimes silence is the truest confession. So this was the whole truth. The wealthy and happy family that was so often flaunted, the love and affection that were so often talked about, were all built on a bloody conspiracy and a long-standing lie. Shin Xingyuan's love, which she repeatedly boasted, and the Shin family's affection and protection for me suddenly seemed utterly hollow and weak in the face of this old vendetta against family interests and blood feuds. They didn't truly protect me. They were only protecting their family's honor and their substitute son-in-law, whom they believed would always be under their control. But as soon as their true interests were threatened and the truth they had suppressed for years was revealed, all the masks on their faces fell away. I looked at Shin Xingyun, the woman I had once truly loved. Her face was filled with shock, pain, disbelief, and perhaps even a hint of guilt for me. Perhaps there was, but it was too late. I removed the needle from my arm. A few drops of blood emerged and fell onto the white sheet. But I didn't even feel the pain. My body was weak from the pain in my knee and the blood loss. Still, I stood up straight. I looked at Shin Xingyuan and spoke in a calm, emotionless voice. Shin Xingyuan opened her mouth to speak. There was pain and confusion in her eyes, as if she wanted to tell me so much, but in the end, she couldn't utter a single word. My mother-in-law stepped forward and helped me. I wanted to hold him, but I slowly pulled away from him. There was pleading and helplessness in his eyes. But I knew nothing could ever be the same. I took out the imperial green jade pendant that belonged to my mother-in-law from the inner layer of my luggage. Perhaps in all the chaos, someone had put it back in my bag. I gently placed it on the bedside table and said, "This is a Shin family item. I'm returning it." Then I looked at my older brother, Fusinian. His eyes held both concern and hope for me. I simply said to him, "I need some time." But I knew very well that I would not stay here any longer. I pulled my suitcase. The soft sound of its wheels echoed on the floor, and I took one step at a time towards the door of the hospital room. This time no one stopped me. I didn't even look at Shin Xingwan once as I passed by him. The bright light of the hall was hurting my eyes. I raised my head and continued walking outside without stopping. Outside the hospital, the cool late autumn breeze hit my face. With every breath, the cold pierced my lungs. But it also cleared the fog in my mind a little. The wound on my knee was pulling at every step. As if he was reminding me again and again that whatever had just happened was not a dream but a very cruel reality. I didn't look back. I no longer had the strength to handle the entire chaos that was left behind. The ruin of the Shin group, the rivalry between Fuxinian and the Shin family, all seemed to be happening behind a hazy mirror. A deep fatigue had overcome me. Not just the physical injuries but the countless injuries that were inflicted on my heart and mind. Who was I after all? Shilling or fooling? My entire life for over 20 years suddenly seemed like a well-planned mistake. What I considered my home turned out to be the home of the enemies of my real family. The woman I loved turned out to be the daughter of my enemy. And the man whom I considered my rival turned out to be my own elder brother, who had been playing tricks behind the scenes all this time to save me. What a strange joke my life was. Just then a black sedan stopped in front of me without making any noise. The window rolled down and an unknown man appeared inside. His face was a little stern, but there was respect for me in his eyes. He said, "Second young master, Mr. Fu sent me to take you to a place to rest." Second young master, I paused for a moment after hearing this. This identity was still completely new to me. I thought for a while, but in the end I didn't refuse. At this time I had no money and no place to go. It seemed like the only person who could support me at the moment was my newfound self. The elder brother was very clever and thought out every step well in advance. The car left the hospital and merged into the city traffic. I leaned my head back on the seat and stared out the window. The neon lights outside were fading and quickly receding. The roads that once seemed so familiar to me, today felt strange and cold. This city that I once considered home because of the Shin family. Now it had become just a place of heartbreak and the root of bad dreams for me. The phone in my pocket was constantly vibrating. I didn't even need to look. I knew the call or message must be from Shin Qingyan or my in-laws. I switched off the phone completely without looking at anything, as if I had cut the last thread connecting me to my past. The car finally stopped in front of a very private and high-end apartment building. The driver took me inside and drove me upstairs to the apartment. The apartment was huge and the decor was exquisite. But he felt a strange coldness and emptiness inside him. I put my luggage down and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The glittering lights of the entire city were visible below. But inside me there was only emptiness and sadness. My body was terribly tired. But my mind was clearer than ever. All the events of the last few months started flashing before my eyes one by one. Almost every step in the list I had written to poke fun at myself and be cautious was within my brother's calculations. He wasn't harming me. He simply chose this extremely harsh method to make me see with my own eyes that Xingyuan and the Shin family were untrustworthy, so that I would lose hope in them, and he had succeeded. I had really given up hope on them completely. I don't know how much time has passed. Then came the sound of the door's electronic lock opening. I turned around and saw Fuxinian coming in. He had changed out of his hospital gown and into a clean black suit. His face was still a little pale. But his eyes were extremely sharp and there was a strong dominance in his entire personality. He looked completely different from that weak and helpless first love, which he had acted in front of the Shin family. She looked at me with confused eyes and asked, "How are you feeling now? Is your injury still hurting?" I just nodded and said nothing. My feelings for him were equally complicated. He was my elder brother. My own blood. But he was also the person who, behind the scenes, turned my entire life upside down. Was I grateful to him? Yes, because he pulled me out of the lie. Did I resent him? Yes, because he chose a very brutal way to show the truth. "This place is safe," said Fuxinian. "Stay here for now. If you need anything, let my assistant know." He went to the cabinet and poured himself a glass of water instead of alcohol. I looked at him and asked, "What's next? You planned all this for so many years. You brought down the Shin group." Fuxinian turned around and leaned against the cabinet, staring at me calmly. "After this, the legal proceedings will begin. The evidence I have is enough to make those two old foxes in the Shin family pay for their actions. Even if the Shin group doesn't go completely bankrupt, it will suffer such a severe blow that it will never be able to return to its previous state. This is the price they have to pay the Fu family. He spoke very calmly, but beneath that calmness, I could clearly sense the anger and hatred that had been suppressed for 20 years. I looked into his eyes and asked, "And what about me?" He remained silent. I continued, "You planned everything. Revealing Shin Xingnan's true identity to me. Taking me away from that family. Even forcing me to leave. Now that everything has been done as you wished. So what next? What place does this younger brother of yours have in your plans?" Fusinian asked. He paused for a moment. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to ask him this question so directly. He came over and tried to put a hand on my shoulder. But I instinctively took a step back. His hand froze midair and the sparkle in his eyes faded slightly. He said softly, "Linzhou, I know this is very difficult for you to accept right now. I chose the worst path, but I had no other choice. I've seen Shin Xingyan live with you. He may have had some genuine feelings for you. But those feelings were so weak compared to the family's interests and the thoughts he'd been ingrained in him for years. Look at what he did to you. He doubted you, accused you, and finally forced you to donate blood for me. He's no different from his parents." Every word, like a knife, reopened the wounds I'd been trying to hide deep inside. Yes, Shin Xingyan once gave me so much love and affection. But when the real test came. So the substitute was easily defeated by my unfounded suspicion, his trust and guilt for Fusinian. I said coldly, "I don't need you reminding me how wronged he was. I just want to know what you think of me now. Or is there anyone else in the Fu family besides us?" Fusinian's voice suddenly softened. For the first time, a deep loneliness lingered in him. "It's just the two of us." He remained silent for a moment. Then he said, "After Mom and Dad left, some of their old people quietly helped me. But now, in the direct bloodline of the Fu family, only you and I are left. Just the two of us." These 4 words weighed heavily on my heart. "I will give you a new identity. If you want, you can leave this city and go anywhere in the world and start your life anew. What's left of the Fu family is enough to sustain us both comfortably for several lifetimes." Fusinian looked at me seriously. And then he said, "Or you can stay with me." After all, it was the first time we 2 brothers had met after so many years. 2 brothers meeting after so many years should have been a very emotional and warm moment. But there was only a strange hesitation and distance between us. We were separated by more than 20 years. Shen was Xingwan, and most importantly, our life experiences and ways of handling things were completely different. I said softly, "I need some time. I needed time to accept this whole truth." It took time to understand this sudden relationship he had with Fa Xinian, and even more time to heal the wounds that were invisible but deep within. Fusinian nodded and didn't pressure me. "Okay, take some rest. I will take care of the outside things." After he left, the apartment became completely quiet once again and I was left alone. The deep silence that spread all around surrounded me. I slowly slid down onto the carpet and buried my face in my knees. It was a real storm outside over the next few days. The news of Shin Group's overseas project being ruined, its capital chain being broken, and the company being accused of commercial fraud and insider trading dominated every financial headline. The company's shares continued to fall. Partners started terminating contracts one after another and banks started demanding their money back. The evidence provided by Fusnian was as if he had already planted bombs in the right places which were now exploding one by one on both the legal and financial fronts. My father-in-law was taken for investigation. My mother-in-law fell ill, and the entire Shin family was thrown into chaos. I knew all this from online news and the occasional information from Fusinians. Now, like an outsider, I was silently watching the disintegration of the family that was once so powerful and proud. Shang Xingyan made countless attempts to contact me. Calls, messages, she even came to the apartment building herself. But the Fusinians did not let him in. I heard that she was starting to look very weak and tired. She was running everywhere to save her family's business. But now it was almost impossible to stop the decline. Once I was standing behind the curtain and I saw him being stopped outside the gate of the building. Once the domineering daughter of the Shin family. The woman now appeared to be surrounded only by helplessness and brokenness. For a moment, a slight pang arose in my heart, but the next moment a much deeper numbness overpowered that feeling. We no longer had just a broken relationship. There stood between us an old blood feud, years of betrayal, and repeatedly choosing someone else over me. Now there was no way to return. Fusinian was very busy. Yet he would make time to meet me every day. Sometimes he would bring food for me and sometimes he would just sit quietly with me for some time. Now he did not do any kind of drama. His true nature was revealed to me. He was a little cold and strict, but sometimes behind that strictness, his concern for me was clearly visible. He would tell me stories about our parents. The love between them, the warmth of the old Fu family, and then the accident that ended everything. Perhaps he wanted to piece back together pieces of my lost past through these stories. I would just listen most of the time and rarely respond. To me, all those things seemed more like someone else's story than my own memories. It was not easy to connect with him. My own memories began with the orphanage. Then she spent many years under the care of different people and finally met Shin Xingwan. I felt that with him I had finally found my home. But now that same house had become the biggest joke of my life. Slowly I started taking care of myself. Treating his knee and arm injuries. I would eat on time and force myself to sleep. My body slowly started to recover. But the emptiness inside the heart was not going to be filled so easily. One day I again took out the same notebook in which I had written all my predictions. Then a frightened and pleading voice reached my ears. Not Shilinga. Mr. Fu, please spare the Shi family. It was my mistake at that time. I was jealous of you and Fusinian used me. But my family did nothing. Fusinian is ruthlessly destroying our business. My father's company is about to go bankrupt. I kept listening to him silently. But no special feelings arose within me. In this feud between the innocent Shen and the Fu family, who could truly claim complete innocence? Shiyan had harassed me before and tried to frame me. It was true. He was simply a pawn willingly involved in the chess game laid out by Fusinian. And now that the game was over, that piece had no value left. I interrupted him in a calm voice. You're asking the wrong person for help. Whatever's going on between me and Fusinian has nothing to do with you. If it's your Shi family's problem, handle it yourself. Saying this, I disconnected the call and blocked his number. Maybe this is how the world works. In the end, the winner takes everything. A few days later, Fusinian brought me more news. Shin father was formally arrested on multiple charges and Shin Group filed for bankruptcy protection. The Shin family, once the ruler of the entire city, was now on the verge of becoming history. Fusinian told me it was all over. But there was no joy on his face at having accomplished his revenge. There was only the deep weariness of years and the relief of finally having the burden lifted. Then he looked at me and his gaze softened a little. Linju, what have you planned for yourself now? I looked out the window. The weather was very clear. The golden light of the sun was scattered across the tall buildings of the entire city. But every corner of the city where I had spent so many years of my life was now filled with memories that I did not want to carry with me. I said, I want to get out of here. Somewhere where no one knows me. Fusinian was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay, I will make arrangements. Where do you want to go? I said, looking outside, I don't know yet. Anywhere. Wherever the path takes me, I will go there. Maybe I needed some time away from everyone to say goodbye to my past. I had to be alone and understand who the real fooling was. The day I was about to leave the city, the weather was extremely nice. Fusinian himself came to drop me off at the airport. There he gave me a new ID and passport on which my name was now written as Fulling. He also gave me a bank card with enough money in it so that I wouldn't have to worry about anything for a very long time. He said, these things were always yours. If you settle down somewhere, let me know. And you can come back whenever you want. I took all the things and kept them in my backpack and just said thank you. But there was a lot inside that small thank you. Thank you for pulling me out of the lie. Thank you for saving me, and most of all, thank you for giving me the chance to choose my life again. Fusinian stared at me for a while. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something. But in the end he said nothing. He just reached out and hugged me lightly. The hug was very short and hesitant. But in my memories, for the first time, there was true warmth that I received from a blood relative. He said softly, take care of yourself. I replied, you too. Then I turned around and headed towards the security check without looking back. After some time the plane had reached above the clouds. I looked down from the window. That city was gradually becoming smaller. But this time there was a strange sense of peace in my heart. Goodbye Xinqingyan, goodbye my substitute life, and goodbye Shirling. There was still a long way ahead of me. Now I was fooling around. He was moving forward, carrying with him many wounds and a very strange past. But I was still alive and I had the chance to choose my life again. This was enough for me. As for Shin Xingwan, I later heard that after the Shin family went bankrupt, she sold all her personal property to try to pay off the family's debts, and then suddenly disappeared. Some people said that she went abroad, while some said that she was living in a small town with a new identity. But now these things had no meaning for me. The moment the whole truth was revealed, our lives became two parallel lines, which were impossible to meet again. The love that I once considered the deepest and most unforgettable love of my life eventually slowly faded away amidst old blood feuds, betrayal and repeated disappointments. And that was probably the best ending for me.